Am I on? Hi, this is Dr. Gail Randall, and I'm here to do my Instagram TV at 6 o'clock. Here we are. Hi, Tam. Okay, so as most of you know, I'm board certified in integrative, internal, and certified in functional medicine and many, many other disciplines. So I love knowledge. I love, love, love it. I don't stop learning. And I don't stop asking questions, and I don't stop teaching. So I'll always be here for you as long as you're there. I'll be coming here to teach you what I know. And today we're going to talk about mercury and other heavy metal toxicity and what to do about it. The problem is most of the time you don't even know you have it. So we live in a world, unfortunately, that environmental pollution is everywhere. You can see it in the sort of glistening rainbow pollution you see on the street when it rains. You see it in the air here in Los Angeles, unfortunately. You see it in the smog. You can see the brown stuff that is accumulated. You know it's there, but it's the secret life of heavy metals that you don't know is there that's really dangerous. So how do we find out about that? How do we know if we have it? And what if we do, what do we do about it? One of the most widespread harmful environmental toxins is mercury. Now, you know, mercury is, it astounds me actually to this day. It's one of the most common heavy metal toxins, and we're still releasing 8,000 metric tons of mercury into the atmosphere yearly. 8,000 metric tons of mercury. Think about that. That's just, you know, phenomenal to me that we're still doing that and we don't have more restrictions on it, because it accumulates. It accumulates in the atmosphere, it accumulates in the environment, and it accumulates in us, because it's attracted to fat and gets in our bodies, gets in the bodies of animals, and it doesn't go away unless you do something to make it go away. So that's part of the problem, and it's very toxic. When I go over metabolic tests with my patients, I like to do these tests with Genova Diagnostics called a NutriVal, although there are many other tests that we can use. You can use regular Quest labs to see if your mercury level is high. You can do another test from SpectraCell to see if, you know, that measures your red blood cells. You can use another company called Doctor's Data. So there are a lot of different ways to measure heavy metals and see if you have them. But the main thing, what I wanted to get to, is when you look at a two-dimensional picture of your metabolism, you see, you know, we are still taking fats, carbohydrates, and proteins by a number of biological reactions catalyzed by vitamins and minerals and turn it into energy. That's the ancient process that came in the first cells that rose out of the primordial soup. And we're doing it in our bodies. This is so ancient. Comes from the first cells that ever rose, and we're still extracting, you know, food and turning it into energy, the same pathway. Now, that's all fine and good. So, you know, if you have the right mixture of minerals and vitamins and food, fats, carbohydrates, and proteins, then everything is perfect. But then sometimes we don't eat right, and sometimes we do eat right, and we still don't get down to the energy phase, because these new things that interrupt the metabolic process have come in, and one of the biggest things is heavy metals. It's just totally like throwing a monkey wrench into your metabolism, and it just stops it. It doesn't work anymore the way it used to. So it's pretty scary when you have it. I interpreted a test for a lady this last week, and we went through her whole test. It was pretty good. She needed more B vitamins. She was under stress. But then we got to the her metabolism, and it really wasn't clicking the way it should. You know, her energy was down. She had fatigue. And we're going like, well, what's the cause? And when we got to the back page, which is where the heavy metals are, she had mercury toxicity that was planked all the way to the right, which means a very high level. And I said, oh, do you eat a lot of fish? She goes, well, I don't really eat that much fish. I go, oh, okay. I go, and I didn't think so, but I asked her all the questions. Do you live near a coal mine? No, I don't live near a coal mine. Well, do you live near where they extract metals from, like gold or something from the mining operation? No, I don't live near a mining operation. And do you live near a freeway? No, I don't live near a freeway. And so the last thing I asked her, well, do you have silver fillings? And the answer to that was yes. So a lot of us are walking around with these silver fillings in our mouth, and we don't realize they have mercury in them. And they're gradually releasing that mercury into our bodies. And if you have high levels like she did, I would recommend to go to a holistic doctor or a doctor that understands this, because if you're going to remove them, you have to do it with a rubber dam, which is something that puts a clamp on your tooth and totally isolates that tooth from the rest of your mouth. So the mercury doesn't go in you. It can be rinsed out and goes out of you. That's a very important point. So if you have silver fillings and a high mercury level and no other reason for it, do consider having them removed, but it has to be done by somebody that understands it. So you use a rubber dam to keep it from toxifying you further. Okay, good point. So anyway, we're still getting 8,000 metric tons of mercury released into our environment every day. That's crazy. The number one thing is burning coal. The number two thing is some kind of coal mining, but there are a lot of products, and this is unbelievable. There are a lot of products, like cleaning products, that have mercury in it. There are a lot of even cosmetics. So I would recommend you go to the website environmentalworkinggroup.com, EWG.com, and they list the safe cosmetics, because they have other toxins, but mercury? Really? Come on. Another common way is fish. So the larger the fish, the more chance they have mercury. So I always tell my patients, no tuna, no swordfish, no sea bass. And if you live on the East Coast or go to the Bahamas, the East Coast people will know grouper. Although it's a great big fish and yummy, it's full of mercury because it's very high on the food chain. So any of these things are very high on the food chain. You got to watch out for. And if you have excess mercury in your body, I would just say stop eating fish. The recommendations is 100 grams a week for a pregnant person or somebody with mercury toxicity, and that's about 3 ounces. But I think even that is too much if you already have an excess. So what do you do if you have an excess? Well, first of all, understand that mercury is a very dangerous neurotoxin. So if you find you do have high mercury levels and you have a peripheral neuropathy, meaning numbness, tingling in your fingers, or maybe your cognition is not quite right, even your immune system, it can affect your immune system very badly. You need to get a level and talk to your doctor about how to get rid of it. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So mercury toxicity can cause headaches, insomnia, again, tingling in the extremities, like I said, problems with speech, hearing, vision, and balance, and cognitive impairment. So if you're getting cognitive impairment for no other reason, maybe you should get a mercury level. Why do the fish have mercury? Well, one thing is everything that we do on the planet ends up in the ocean, but gold mining is a big thing, and all these industrial coal mining and gold mining, and it ends up in the ocean, and then it ends up in our fish. So it's very sad, but that's what's going on. They did a study in New Zealand and found that people with high levels of mercury suffered fatigue, memory loss, depression, and hair loss. And I had a patient that came to me one time just simply for hair loss. And then we found out through her history that her husband was an angler, which means a fisherman. And they were eating from the ocean like almost every day. So again, that tells you, you know, our big fish are contaminated, and she came for hair loss. And so that was a really unusual thing to find for that. Usually it's stress or sometimes hormones, but hers was mercury. And chelation helped her. Needless to say, there are a variety of tests, as I mentioned, that you can do to get rid of the mercury, or to see if you have it. So the other thing that happens is when the mercury gets into the water and into the fish, it turns into a more dangerous kind of mercury called methyl mercury. And that's the stuff that's in those fish I talked about. So that we want to avoid that, especially pregnant women and people that have found they have high mercury levels. So my recommendation for high mercury levels is just go off fish completely and then do some form of chelation. There's other toxins we need to worry about in the atmosphere. Of course, there's glyphosates that come from Monsanto, and pesticides, radioactive particles, other heavy metals like lead, arsenic, and cadmium. There are even other heavy metals that can accumulate, like copper, iron, and zinc. Although those are things we need in our bodies, they can get too high. Copper and zinc have sort of a teeter-totter relationship. So everybody's been taking what? A lot of zinc to protect ourselves from COVID, right? Because it opens up the zinc channels, goes in our cells, and protects us from any kind of viral particles that might get in there. But if you took a lot of zinc and you didn't take enough copper, you might be too high on the zinc, and that can cause, you know, problems too with your nervous system and whatnot. So it really helps to get these levels once in a while. So you got to make sure you get enough copper. Copper comes from pumpkin seeds, of all things, pumpkin seeds, and also oysters. If you eat those kind of things, can increase your copper. I prefer cremini mushrooms. Cremini mushrooms are those little brown ones about this big, and they have a lot of copper in them. So I think that's a really good way to get your copper. So there, you know, the standard chelation, if you have very high levels and you have symptoms, you might consider getting IV chelation. I don't prefer that. I prefer doing green drinks on a regular basis and some other natural products, which I'm going to mention in a little bit. But if you do the IV chelation, there's two main things that they use. EDTA, which is a synthetic amino acid, but that removes mostly lead. But sometimes people use it for mercury, but it's not as effective as DMSA, which is a different chelation stuff that's used. It's really more effective for mercury, arsenic, and EDTA is more for the lead, in my opinion. But the problem with those is they also remove the good stuff. So they take out your magnesium, they take out your calcium, you could get muscle cramps. A lot of people will give those things at the same time as taking the other stuff out. But, you know, I find this is the problem, relocation. If you free up the heavy metals with these things, you better have a way that it's going to flush it out of your body, because it will just find another home, and maybe in a worse place. Like maybe you took it out of your, like lead tends to accumulate in the bones. And I say let sleeping dogs lie, because if you free up that lead, it's going to come out of there, and if you don't immediately chelate that with some natural greens or pectosol alginate or something from Research Nutritionals called metal pull, and be on it really regularly and get that, as soon as it gets freed up, it's going to relocate, and it's going to go maybe to your brain or someplace, you know, worse than where it was. So you got to keep that in mind if you decide to do it, or if you're a doctor and you decide to do it. So, you know, just keep that in mind, you know, if you're going to free it up, a much safer way, in my opinion, is, if you don't have symptoms, is to do these green drinks on a regular basis. My formula is the following. Cilantro, because it's a very potent chelator. It's probably the best one in terms of herbs. Parsley is also a very potent chelation herb. And any kind of green, I like to use collard greens, dandelion greens, which are also very potent chelators. And then give it a little taste with a carrot, an apple, and then maybe I like to put some mint and jalapeno, because I've heard my patients say too many times, you want me to drink pond scum? I'm like, no. So I made it into a mojito, you know, because we add a little mint, which also is healthy for your gastrointestinal tract, and the jalapeno is good for your mucosa, plus it gives it a little kick, and it just makes you think you're drinking something cool and good instead of, you know, quote-unquote pond scum. For the fluid, I like to use coconut water, but you can use water or whatever. I wouldn't use one of the milks because it gets a little funky. So again, the formula is cilantro, parsley, collard greens, dandelion greens for sure, and maybe a carrot, maybe a green apple, mint, and jalapeno. And that's going to take the heavy metal out of your body, especially at the same time if you avoid those heavy metal fish, the mercury fish that I mentioned before. Tuna, swordfish, sea bass, grouper, and then I didn't mention these, but lobsters, because they're bottom feeders, and crabs accumulate mercury as well. But the things like scallops, they clean out because they're bivalves. They do this all the time, so they rinse themselves out. Salmon has less mercury because they swim upstream to breed, but they still have it. So it's not like they're without it, but they're cleaner. But then the salmon are very stressed. We have the least number of salmon this year than ever. So keep that in mind too. I know it's always a balance. It's always a balance. And do not do farmed fish because it has different toxins in it. It has PCBs, it's dyed, and they're really sick animals. If you really look into it and study it, about 50% of them don't make it to the growing process. So they're infected. It's really not a happy thing, farmed salmon. But anyway, so I mentioned about when you do the IV chelation with either EDTA or DMSA, that it removes those essential minerals, calcium and magnesium. So just be sure you supplement those, or, you know, the best way, if you're really going to do the IV chelation, is to give it IV at the same time. So, but again, you got to catch those heavy metals as they come out of your organs and bones and body with the other agents, the natural ones I'm mentioning, so that it doesn't relocate. Relocation is a big problem. So when you do it, the other thing you got to remember is to be very, very attentive to your detoxification mechanisms. Glutathione is the most powerful and prevalent detoxification molecule in your body. There's a couple of ways to get it. You can eat meats and organ meat, but also what's a really good way are cruciferous vegetables, because I'm a vegan, so I want to know other ways. So cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower, asparagus, and things like that, increase your glutathione. Any kind of sulfur-rich food, like cruciferous vegetables, and also whey protein can increase your glutathione levels. And alpha-lipoic acid, vitamin C, selenium, NAC will help glutathione production. So cauliflower, kale, cabbage, which are cruciferous vegetables, also help glutathione production and detoxification in general. So you don't have to eat meat to do it, but it is in meat. So glutathione works with those mitochondria to detoxify you and also give you energy. So you need your glutathione, and so does the alpha-lipoic acid. So be sure that you're flush on those. Garlic, cilantro, and chlorella are an algae superfood, can also help remove heavy metals. Garlic binds to the mercury and helps to pull it out of the soft tissues, as well as chlorella. It's a softer kind of chelation. Cilantro, that's the big guns. It's heavy duty. It pulls the heavy metals out of anywhere in your body and actually can cross the blood-brain barrier. Who knew, right? To remove mercury from there. So I love that. My top recommendations for chelation products, as I referred to before. Oh, I want to give credit to Dr. Isaac Elias, and I hope to have him on my podcast soon. I'm the host and creator of Soul Stories podcast, which you can find on any of your podcast stations. It's a phenomenal project, and you ought to check it out. Anyway, so I want to thank Dr. Elias for some of the information in this Instagram TV. So thank you, Isaac, for that. So he has a product which is modified citrus pectosol, MCP, with alginates. Now what that means is the regular citrus pectosol is larger, the molecule is larger, where this is a smaller molecule which can get into the bloodstream, and then it's with alginates, which are from seaweed, which help to remove metals. There's another natural agent in the researched nutritionals product, which is humus, which is actually moss. So the moss, amazingly enough, back to Mother Earth again, can help remove these heavy metals from our bodies. And I wouldn't be surprised if Paul Stamets has a mushroom, but I don't know about it yet, so I'm just talking through my hat there. Speaking of hats, you know, we used to have something called Mad Hatter's disease because the people that were in the felt hat industry got mercury toxicity because they used mercury to give those felt hats that really nice, fuzzy kind of look, and they applied it with their hands, and of course they got toxic from that. So they called it Mad Hatter's disease because they went a little cuckoo and didn't think right. And a lot of times with these heavy metals, people get behavioral problems too. So we don't want to be a Mad Hatter. The alginates, as I mentioned, also are powerful yet gentle, removing from the soft tissues, but what they do together is prevent that reabsorption. But all those things I mentioned, the Dr. Elias's product, the modified citrus pectin with alginates, and even chlorella and other seaweeds help remove heavy metals. But the metal pull from Research Nutritionals, which is the humus, and the green drinks, which is my favorite, which I gave you the formula for, prevent that reabsorption. And that's the key in getting rid of these heavy metals. It's really important and critical to avoid this game of musical chairs because once the metals go into another place, they may not be able to be as easily removed. So they need to be flushed out of the body completely before they redeposit somewhere else. And the period of time that Dr. Elias recommends being on the modified citrus pectosol with alginates is 2 to 4 weeks. And my personal recommendation is to stay on green drinks on a regular basis. You know, if you have the toxicity, on a daily basis for 3 months. If you don't have it, you just want to prevent it at least once or twice a week. Okay, it's very healthy for you. Plus, intense leafy greens stimulate your energy production in your mitochondria, and we all want more energy, right? So, the other thing that you could do when you're detoxing is to go on Dandelion, Dr. Elias says, and milk thistle. Well, I always want people to take Dandelion in my green drink, and I take milk thistle every day. And just because we live in a toxic environment and silymarin or milk thistle helps your liver to detoxify, but also helps your kidneys. A lot of people don't know that. So we can, even though mercury pollution is becoming more prevalent, we can limit the toxic effects by doing our self-care and prevention with the green drinks or some of these natural products, avoiding heavily polluted areas, and not eating big fish. So that's my recommendation. Just in detail, there's a few things that people don't know about certain heavy metals. Lead is still being found in people, although a lot of times it's in people that are 60 or older, because when those people were young, the paint had lead in it. And if they were in a room or in a house that had that lead paint, they got it in their bodies and it'll be in their bones. But like I said, I don't like to free it up unless it's causing a problem. Because when it's in the bones, it's kind of like let sleeping dogs lie, let it stay there, because you don't want to free it up and have it go to your brain and make things worse. If people present with abdominal pain, diarrhea, this peripheral neuropathy I mentioned, and anemia, and brain problems, the other way that you can tell if people have, this is really interesting, lead poisoning, is they'll have what's called MEES lines, M-E-E-S lines, which are like white bands. Just like my French manicure, like a white band, only it'll be like right across the middle of your nail bed. That's how I had an old professor that taught me that at UCLA, Dr. Arthur Schwabe, amazing gentleman and a scholar. But he taught me about MEES lines, and it still is effective in diagnosing lead poisoning. So look for that if you're a doctor, or look for it in yourself if you're worried you have that. Arsenic is another heavy metal toxin that a lot of people don't think about. It comes from the manufacture of pesticides. It actually is in a lot of pesticides. Arsenic gas it comes with industrial uses, but there's a hidden arsenic that maybe a lot of people don't know about. It's in rice. So I like to use lotus rices. They're organic, and they're colored, and they're very nutrient dense. The color of the rice indicates the nutrients that's in there, like purple has your anthocyanidins, the green has what's in green foods, like green leafy vegetables, the red rice has lycopene. So it's a very healthy rice, and it has the lowest arsenic levels of all the rices, and it's organic. But regular rice is grown in water that has a lot of arsenic in it, and so that's how it gets in the rice. So, and arsenic accumulation can also cause MEES lines on your fingernails. So it's funny, a lot of these, like the lead and the arsenic, will cause anemias, unexplained anemias. So if there's an unexplained anemia, maybe you ought to check for heavy metals. Cadmium is an interesting heavy metal. It comes from electroplating, which a lot of us don't get around unless we do that, but batteries, storage batteries. And, you know, when batteries are thrown in junkyards, at least they're vapors, and a lot of people just put their batteries in their garbage. I recommend putting them in a special garbage, which they do have. This is something a lot of people don't think about. You get cadmium, you know, in toxic levels if you're a smoker. And if you are around a smoker, or your mate is a smoker, that secondhand smoke can give you significant cadmium levels in your blood. So think about that. If you're a solderer or a welder, that's another way to get cadmium or, in fact, lead in your body accumulating. So I'm just telling you things that people don't think about. The other thing with mercury that people may not think about, of course, other than the silver fillings, if you're a dental assistant or a hygienist, or a chemical worker, you're going to accumulate mercury in your body. But with mercury, it's mostly the silver fillings, the large fish, and then the industrial sources that I mentioned. So that's pretty much it, is what I wanted to talk about heavy metal toxicity, what the main metals are. The main metals, as I mentioned, that we deal with are lead, mercury, arsenic, and cadmium. They can be easily detected and measured in the tests that I mentioned. If you just want to get a mercury level, it's not quite as accurate, but you can have your doctor run a Quest lab for it. If you want to be more accurate, you would get what's from Genova Diagnostic, a NutriVal, which measures your whole metabolism, but also your heavy metals. SpectraCell is another one, and Doctor's Data can measure just the heavy metals that way. So those are the tests that you would want to do, and then I already mentioned the ways to keep your body clean from heavy metals. So does anybody have any questions? I'd like to open it up for questions. Ask the Soul Doctor anything, or ask about heavy metal toxicity. I'd love to answer some questions tonight. I know there's a delay on Instagram, so I'll give you a chance. Did you guys see my last Instagram TV on inflammation? That's a really, really useful one because, 70% of our healthcare dollars go towards diseases that are caused by chronic inflammation. So it's the final common denominator of all diseases that cause us to die. So you want to check that out because we don't want those. And I talked in detail about how to prevent them, how to prevent inflammation, where inflammation occurs in your body. No questions tonight? I'm all ready. Just stick your quarter in. All right, you guys. Well, I love you, and I'll be back next week with another great subject. So if you wanted to ask me a question and you're too shy or didn't get a chance, you can DM me on my Instagram, and I answer all my questions. Also, don't forget to turn into my podcast, which is Soul Stories, on all your major podcast stations. Thanks for the hearts. And the last one we just did is going to be released on Monday, was on Nobuko Miyamoto, who is an Asian leader and activist and artist. She calls herself an artivist. Was so amazing. You got to check that out. She really is a leader. Her music is in the Smithsonian. Her book, called Not Your Butterfly, is just going to be released on June 15th, so watch for that. My book, called Soul Doctoring, Heal Yourself, Heal the Planet, is still in publication, so I'll let you know when that comes out. It's also an amazing book. It'll help you through this post-COVID time. It's about a little bit about my biography, but also a lot about different healing modalities and how to heal yourself and self-care. And then it also addresses our planetary ills right now and what we might do about them. So, good stuff. All right, guys. You have a great weekend, and I'll see you next week, okay? All right, bye-bye.